Hello there. Glad you guys could join me today. Hey, Susan. Hey, Pat. Yes, you did. You picked the right time to be online, Pat. Okay. All right. I'm going to wait just a second to see if we get some other people coming on here. And then we'll get going. We have a very fun, easy project to do. Easy provided you have the right tools. A lot of it comes down to having the right tools to do the different jobs. So if you've been doing this a while, you probably do have all the stuff. If you haven't, you should be adding to your stash as you are able. All this stuff is expensive, I know. It's taken me a good many years to accumulate all this stuff, so it's not like you can just run out and get everything you need, but if you've been doing it for a while, you should have a considerable amount of tools and things in your jewelry repertoire. Okay. So I'm going to get started. This is the project that we have going today. Let me make sure that I'm in the frame. I have two different, I don't think that helped, did it? Let's see. Is that better? That might be better. We'll get a little closer. I have two different sets that I'm showing. I still think I need to come back more. Let's see if that helps. Or am I going the wrong way? Let's see here. It's hard when you're watching stuff in the reverse. Okay, I think I've got it now. Hey, Rhonda. Okay, so I have two different sets here, and this one is made with 14 gauge wire, and this one is made with 16 gauge wire right here. So the 16 gauge naturally is a little bit thinner than the 14 gauge. I prefer, for myself, I prefer the 14 gauge. Hey, Toots. How you doing, Marianne? I just prefer the 14 gauge because it's just a little bit more substantial, in my opinion. But if you really like lightweight earrings, the 16 gauge works fine. So what I'm using is two different wires. I've got 14 gauge and 20 gauge on this side, and then they're soldered together, which I will walk you through that part. And you'll see how easily they come together. I shouldn't say that though, because that's kind of like setting me up for something to screw up. So, all right. So anyway, that's the earrings. That's the project. And in the handout on the last page, I printed up just like a little guide to get the spiral right if you have problems making the spiral. You don't have to use that if you don't want to, but it's just kind of a guide to help out a little bit if you need that. And you'll find that on the last page of the handout. All right, so I'm going to set these aside and we'll get started. First off, I need some wire. And I have my 20 gauge here and some 14 gauge. Lift this up a little bit. Okay. Hopefully we'll have a good connection. I was having a little issue earlier with the internet moving very slow. So I hope we can get past that. And what I'm going to do is all of these instructions, everything I'm doing is in the handout, but following along with the demo is very helpful, which can be played at any time. You guys know that. What did I do with my ruler? Honestly. Oh, here it is. I have stuff everywhere. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut 3 inches of both wire, both gauges of wire. So this is my 20 gauge right here. I'm going to cut 2 3-inch lengths. On the 20 gauge, you might actually get by with a little bit less than 3. I just, I just said 3, but I know that there's going to be a little bit of waste. There always is, unless you like the earring wires to hang really long on your neck, which I don't. If you have a long neck, you could probably do it, but I don't. So I'll be cutting these down a little bit. So that's my 2 wires of 20 gauge, and I'm going to make sure they're cut flush on both ends. But we're gonna fix that. We have to make sure that they're super flush and even. And I'll show you that in the miter vise, how you use that if you don't know. All right, so those are my 2 20 gauge wires. Set that aside. And now I've got my 14 gauge wire. I'm going to nip off this little point here right off the bat. And this we want every bit of the 3 inches. Oh dear, my husband just started the lawnmower. And I've got the back door open because it's a beautiful day. So I hope that that doesn't interfere with the sound. Okay, and now I've got my 2 3-inch pieces of 14 gauge wire. So the next thing I want to do is make sure that these ends are very flat. So the best way to do that is with a miter vise. If you know about these, you know what it's all about, how you use them. If you don't, this is a nifty tool. I guess you have to unscrew that. This is a nifty tool that you can line up your wire. There's a little, this can be used for a lot of different things, but I don't know how to use it for those things. I only know how to use it for what I'm doing right now, and that's worth the price of the tool itself. Okay, so I'm lining my wire up against that little block, and just letting, you want to make sure that it's right up against that little block or notch or whatever you want to call it. And just a little bit is sticking out. That's the part that we want to file flat and smooth. So as long as you've got it in position correctly, you're good to go. And then I take a flat file and I'm just going to file the end of that wire till it's flat with this little tool, so that you can't feel any difference when you run your finger over it. But it's nice and flush. There's nothing sticking out now, nothing pokey. And I'm going to turn this around. You have to unscrew it, lift this up. I'm going to turn it around and do that to the opposite end as well. Make sure you're all straight. And then screw these little knobs down. And do the same thing on this side. He didn't tell me he was cutting the grass today. I'm going to shut the back door. Okay, so that one's done. Move on to the next one. It's supposed to get really hot here this week. We haven't gotten any nice weather. Any, I don't know, it's gone to from like 50 to 80. So I'd kind of like to get something in the upper 60s and lower 70s, please. I'd like to get a little bit of spring in there before we go right into summer, but it's supposed to be like, I don't know, 89 or something tomorrow. It's ridiculous. But I guess we get what we get. All right, so I'm lining that up. I can feel that point sticking out there. File that flat again. Okay, that's nice and smooth. It's blazing hot in Texas. Oh man, Elaine. I feel sorry for you guys. I couldn't take that extreme heat like that. You know, being close to Chicago, it's weird. It's sometimes the weather's kind of unpredictable, but we know for a fact we're always going to get about 5 months of really crappy weather in the winter. And we only really get about, I don't know, 2 or 3 really decent months a year, what I consider decent. But I guess it's all where you live, and we get humidity just like a lot of places. That's the killer, when you get the heat and the humidity. Oh, that fell out. I can't talk when I'm doing stuff. I get too distracted. Okay. All right. It really doesn't take much, especially on this 20 gauge wire, to get that nice and smooth. I'll do that on both ends. Okay, there's that. Hello, Anna Marie. Thanks for joining us. Okay. All right, I'm just about done with this. This is to me, this is very important, this step, and you'll see why in a minute. Okay. All right. So that's all I'm using the miter vise for today. Hi, Venera. Okay. All right, so I've got my 4 pieces of wire. Got my little little sterling crumbs here. Keep that in my little scrap jar later. All right, so what we want to do, or at least what I want to do, is texture, give this just a little bit of a hammered texture on the 14 gauge wire. So you want to make sure, or try to get your wire to be as straight as possible starting out. And another thing that's important is when you're pounding on wire, it kind of turns around a little bit. So if you want to make sure that you keep your pattern all on the same row or same side of the wire, you kind of have to hold on to it a little bit. So just kind of be careful with that. Hey, Monica. Oh, you're in Tennessee? How nice. I need to go on a little trip. All right, so I'm going to take the ball peen end of my hammer, and I've got my thumb holding down this wire because I don't want it to turn as I hit it. But I'm just going to texture as best I can on this side of the wire. And as soon as you start hitting it, it starts to bend. It's just how it is. That's why it's hard to get it all in the same side, because it wants to turn. And it did turn a little bit, even so, but not bad. Just be aware that it's important to hold on to the wire if you want to get that pattern all in the same place. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is straighten this back out again as best I can. I'm going to take some flat nose pliers and just kind of convince it to move a little bit. It's all helpful, you know, to do all these little steps so that stuff turns out successfully. All right, so that's probably as straight as I'm going to get that piece. And I'll do the other one now. Oh, and while I'm here, while I'm at it, one of the ends, I'm going to flatten the end a little bit, kind of splay it out a little bit. If you can tell, hopefully you can tell, you can see that that's just a little bit wider there. That's where I'm going to start my spiral later. And then this end is the end that I'm going to solder to the 20 gauge wire. All right, so that's ready for soldering. All right, so I'll set that to the side and I'll get the other one. Hi, Janet. Oh, I'm glad you liked the design challenge. It was fun. It was fun. Everybody's stuff was different, and I really enjoyed seeing what you all came up with. It was fun. It really makes you think outside of the box. Excuse me, a little bit. Because honestly, when I picked those items, I didn't really know where I was going with it. But I thought, you know, let's give it a whirl and see what happens. And it really worked out well. Everybody's ideas were totally different. All right, so I'm going to texture this side of this piece of 14 gauge wire. You don't have to texture it if you don't want to, or you could texture it with something different. You could use a little line embossing hammer and make little lines across it. I think that'd be kind of cute. I didn't think about that before, but that might be kind of nice. with just a little bit of texture, kind of catches the light. So that's kind of nice. And pounding on this has really hardened this 14 gauge. So when we solder on the 20 gauge wire to this piece, we're going to anneal this section here, so that way when we want to make our spiral, we can bend the wire easily. The first pair I made, I didn't do that, and it was kind of a bugger trying to twist the spiral. Okay. Now, the reason I did that filing in the miter vise is so that both of these ends are flat, and I will be able to solder them together without any problem. If you don't do that, you're going to have a little point on either or both of your wires, and then you're not going to get a real good solder joint. Okay, so let's move this out of the way. Oh, I didn't do the little paddle on this one. So okay, so I've got the little paddle on that end as well, if you can see it. Okay. All right, moving this out of the way. I'll get my solder stuff over here. All right, now I'm going to be using these little hummingbird holders. I have used them for a lot of different projects. If you don't have them, I would highly recommend having these in your tools, in your tool stash, because they are very, very handy, and they're pretty much necessary for this particular application. I'm also using a little piece of titanium sheet that I'll have in the reference section of the handout. This is, I believe this is 26 gauge titanium. Rio Grande offers the titanium. I don't know about other places, but I bought mine from Rio, and they offer it in, like, I want to say 22 gauge and 26 gauge. I would get the thinnest possible, because sometimes you just need a little bit of extra height, and if you needed more, you could stack up more pieces and get a higher or thicker piece. So that, I think, is a real necessary item that you should have along with the hummingbirds. All right, so where's, okay, the other wire. Gotta find everything here. Get my quench bowl here. And the first pair that I made, I used paste solder because I thought that that's what I should use to kind of hold these pieces together. But then I tried just using the regular wire solder, and it worked just fine. All of these things are a heat sink, but you're going to use enough heat. It's not going to really make the project take a whole lot longer. The wire that we're using is so minimal or thin, whatever. There's not that much to heat it up, so I don't think it's really a factor or a bad factor in the heat sink area. All right, so I'm lining up the blunt end of the 14 gauge, and I'm resting the 20 gauge on top of the titanium. And stuff, you know, these warp a little bit sometimes, so you want to kind of reflatten those things out too. They're all factors in making something work successfully or not. So I'm butting up those two pieces of wire together, and I'm going to lay one of the Humminbird holders on the 14 gauge, and then the other one will be on the 20 gauge. And you know, it's a little fiddly to do this part, but it's well worth it. Setting up is very important, and try to get right in the middle of this wire, of the 14 gauge wire. It's butted up right next to them. I don't know if you can see that very well or not. Oh, you like my tooth case? Yes, this is one of my favorite things. When I worked in the dental office, there was one dental lab that we used that always sent the crowns that were made for patients in one of these little tooth boxes. And for the most part, we would send the tooth boxes back, you know, to recycle them. But I had to keep my share of them. So I have a few, but not too many. But this one's cracked. But I always keep my easy solder in this one. All right, so I'm going to set that on the side. I've got a few solder chips. I've got my flux. Flux that up. And get my torch. Hopefully I won't burn the my phone. And just set this up a little bit higher so that doesn't happen. Hopefully. All right, so I've got my torch, I've got a solder pick, I've got my little chips of solder here. I always put a couple extra on the tray because sometimes they blow off as soon as I introduce the flame to them. So I'll turn on the torch. And I'm going to first thing heat my solder up and stick it to the pick. Okay, now I'm going to heat up my wire. And I'm going to drop that little solder ball right on the join between those two metals. And it's still got to heat up, but the little solder is placed. And it's taken longer because of the heat sinks of the Humminbird and the titanium. And then I'm going to, the solder just flowed, and I'm just kind of moving it up to make sure that that 20 gauge wire got it all, or got enough of it. All right, we'll see if that, I can see a lot of the solder flowed on the 14 gauge, and I want to make sure that the 20 gauge got enough of it. It appears to be okay. All right, so quench that, and we'll take a look. Yep, it's soldered on. There's a little bit of roughness on here, a little bit of excess solder. We can knock that off with a little abrasive wheel. Or you could do it with a file as well. I like the abrasive wheels because they're a lot faster. So that is stuck on there. But now, before I quench this piece, I'm going to give the 14 gauge wire a little extra heat to anneal that a little better, because this is still very stiff right here. And we need it to not be stiff when we're going to make the spiral. So I'm just going to give this a little bit more heat. I'm going to stay away from the join. I don't need to heat it all the way up there. This is the most important area here where I'm going to form the spiral. So I just want to get that nice and annealed. Okay. I've got my utility pliers. These are great to use for hot things. All right. So now it's a lot softer. All right, so I'm gonna bend this wire a bit. Actually, I could go ahead and make my spiral, and then I'll stick it in the pickle. I'll do that on this one first. I've got my texture on this side, and I'm gonna get some round nose pliers. And right at the tip of the wire, and right on the edge of the pliers, I'm going to take my wire and roll it away from me. And make that first spiral, okay? And if you want to check it, you know, with your paper as you go along, you can do that. That's totally up to you. You can make your spiral however you want, but if you're trying to make them uniform, you're going to have to give it a little extra care. Now I'm holding on to the wire with my fingers like this while I bend the wire, and then I'm going to keep moving the spiral. It's also shaping this as a little bit of a curve with my fingers as you turn. And I pretty much match. I've got a little bit more curve in here, but my spiral's pretty much the same as it is on the paper. Okay, so you can make them however you want, but to fit in my pickle jar right now, I have to do this. Okay, so I'm going to do that one. Any questions yet so far? Put this in my pickle. I've just got a little mason jar, a small mason jar with some pickle in it on a candle warmer or cup warmer, whichever you want to call it. And while I'm working here at the table. All right, so now we'll do the second piece. We've got the flush end, and my hummingbirds are already cooled off, which is great. It's probably a good idea when you're working, if you have something, if you're going to be using the hummingbirds a lot, to have like a cold steel, your bench block, something like that, that's already cool, and you can set this hot object on there. It will cool this off a whole lot faster. It won't hurt your bench block. At least I've never seen it, any harm to it. So, okay, and now I'm going to take my 20 gauge and try to straighten this up. See, this is much easier than you might have thought. Of course, we're not all the way done with it yet, but you know, we still have to put the bezel cup on. All right, but that's also not difficult. It's all in the tools and the setup. You take the time to do the stuff the right way, stuff works out a whole lot better. All right, now I want to bring up a little piece of solder up here. I've got a couple of them up here because, like I said, they have a tendency to blow away when you put the flame on it. All right, I'm butting up the 14 gauge to the 20 gauge. I don't know, can you see what I'm doing? Ugh. Solder board's a little bit warm. Really try to get in the center of that wire. The first couple attempts that I did, I wasn't really super straight on the earrings that I posted for the demo. I had a little bit of trouble with that, and I had a lot of extra or excess solder on the piece too, which if you can try to avoid that, that's good. But I want to make sure that I'm touching here. Even with my cheaters on, I still have a problem seeing super well. I think that's good. All right, so now I'm going to spray on my flux. If you use the paste solder, it will hold it together a little bit better, sort of, but by the same token, the solder that paste kind of covers that area up, so you're not 100% certain where you're supposed to be, or if you're where you're supposed to be, put it that way. So I just automatically figured I needed the paste solder first, and then I realized I don't really have to use that. So it's really up to you. All right, I'm going to get my little solder chip. Oh, come on. All right. I only got part of that. Sometimes your solder sticks to the board, and I think it might be because there's flux on the board. I think I'm going to get another piece of solder. That one looks kind of yucky. I think I lost some of it. See how it blows? It wants to blow away. Okay, there we go. Now heat up the wires. Place the little solder ball right there. And I'm kind of pulling that solder to go on the 20 gauge a little bit more. Okay. Remember, these are screaming hot. So I haven't done much of this joining of the two wires like this, but I think that it's pretty cool, and you could probably do a whole lot more kinds of styles of earrings by doing this. Oh, I'm going to anneal this piece here. Forgot about that. Let's do that. And then the other one should be ready to come out of the pickle, I would think. I'm staying away from the solder joint I'm just annealing the 14 gauge wire because I don't want to disrupt that solder joint at all. Sorry, I have to look at my arm. All right, so now I'll go ahead and I'll form the spiral on this. And I'm just using regular round nose pliers. They don't have to be the big ones. I might have written big ones on the handout. I'll have to check. I use those long round nose pliers a lot, but for this is fine. You just put the wire in at the tip of the wire, flush with the tines of the pliers, roll away from me. Make sure I'm on the textured side. Yep. Yep. And that flattening that we did, you know, to make that little paddle on the end, that just finishes it off. It makes it look a little bit nicer than to just have a piece of wire that's kind of just chopped off. I should get the other one out of the pickle, and then I can compare if I'm on target or not. Now I went a little bit crooked here, so I'm just going to straighten this out with my flat nose pliers. Get that back in alignment. All right, let me grab that other one out of the pickle. Tongs. Okay, here we go. I had to move today, the demo to today instead of tomorrow on Tuesday. Tuesday's our regular day, as you know. But my husband has a dentist appointment tomorrow, and I have to pick up our grandson from school. So that is why I had to do this today. This just worked out better for me. All right, so now I'm going to line these two up and see if I can get them to match. Sometimes you need to use your fingers, and that's absolutely okay. Fingers work great. So you can see that I am not right on course here. Or maybe you can see, I don't know. We'll try to get them as matching as possible. But, you know, they're on two sides of your head, so, or, you know, opposite ends. So if they're a little bit off, it's really not a huge big deal. It's just depends on how anal you are. So with some things, I can get very anal, and other things I don't really care. So go figure. All right, I can futz around with this a little bit more later, but you want to make sure that you pretty much got the same amount of wire so that they're the right length up here as well. I think I took a little too much off of this one. I don't know why this is so different. That's crazy. I guess I made my spiral a little bit deeper. We'll get rid of some of this. You can kind of mess around with it, you know, for quite a bit. to get it just right, if you want. But I can see there's a big difference between the two of them. I thought I was close, but I'm not. This is very different. You want to be careful too, though, with your round nose pliers that you don't dig into the wire, this wire, with the rounds. If you can use your flat nose pliers once you've made your first coil or spiral, you're probably better off. But you're getting the idea of what you have to do. How's that puppy, Wendy? He's as cute as can be. I'm sure he's a lot of work right now, though, just being separated from his family, his puppy family. I would love to have another dog, but I don't want to go through all that training and stuff again. This is much better now. Like I said, you just have to futz around with it a little bit. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and put this one in the pickle. And then we'll attach the cabochon, or the bezel cup, to this now. Okay. So for that, hey Tammy, glad you could join us. All right, so for attaching the bezel cup, you need a third hand, which probably most of you all do or have one already. If you don't, I suggest investing in one. They're like $10 or less, usually. So for this is a little tricky too, but very doable. I've got two little 4mm bezel cups here, and I'm going to get two pieces of solder, of easy solder. Theoretically, just by the fact that I soldered this as a first solder, this should probably be medium or hard solder. But because these areas are kind of far away from each other, and I'm not really introducing much heat over here, I think I can get by with the easy. But it probably would be better if I suggested using the medium or hard solder first, and then this part with the easy solder. I'm going to spray a little bit of flux on the bezel cups. I've got them upside down, and I'm going to take a solder chip and I'm going to just melt it onto the backs of these bezel cups for right now. Very quick process because the bezel cups are very thin. Actually, I could just set the solder right on top. There we go. The flux will hold it on. But you still have to be careful because it could fly off. And there, that melted that fast. Same there. But I want to make sure it's spread out. Okay. All right. So those are done. And now what I'm going to do is take the earring and I'm going to mark where I want this bezel cup to lay. Okay, so I'm going to take a Sharpie marker and just say, it doesn't really matter where I put it, but I want the second one to match it. So it's best if you do it like that. So I know where it's going to sit. And the other one's going to have to wait a minute because the other thing's in the pickle. Now I'm going to spray this with Flux again. There. And then I'm going to put this is the tricky part, is lining up your spiral wire to lay flatly on the bezel cup and not be cockeyed and not move. So this takes a few little adjustments. And it has to sit flatly on there, not crooked at all. It has to be flat on, and you want it right in the center of the bezel cup. So it's not over to one side more than the other. All right, I think that's pretty good. All right, I'm gonna hold my breath. There, that's better. Sometimes you need to get up and look at things to make sure that you're in the right spot. And then I'm going to just heat this area up. The third hand acts as a heat sink as well, but I don't want too much heat on that bezel cup itself because I'll melt it. So I'm going to just keep that heat moving until everything heats up. Heat on this side as well. And there we go. Ta-da! It's on. I'm going to dunk the whole thing in the water because the third hand is very hot as well. Bezel cup is on. All right, so now let's switch out these pieces. All right, copper tongs, here we go. Alrighty. Oh, I still need that one though to line up where I laid the bezel cup, where I placed it. I mean, this is still not to my liking. All right, let me get that other one back. All right, so this is still quite a bit crooked. I hate that when you can get one just perfect and the other one just doesn't want to cooperate. I made this part a little bit too big. I can see what I did, but I'm having trouble correcting it. Just bear with me, guys. I know it's boring. when things aren't moving very fast. But I'd rather have them the same, even though they are on opposite sides of my head. Maybe there's an easier way and I'm just not seeing it, but you know, it's kind of how I do things. When you don't measure everything exact and you're not exactly real meticulous on measuring and things, I guess you kind of get what you get. But for the most part, it works out. Okay, I'm good with that now. All right, so now I'm just going to mark with my Sharpie where I want to put, where's the one? That's the one I want. Okay. Okay, we can go back in the pickle. All right. All right. So I'll take my other bezel cup, spray some flux on it. Have it stick to my fingers. Come on. Now he's on the side of the house mowing. Okay. We aren't on here, okay? Okay. Oh, Monica says you can twist both wires at the same time on forming pliers to get exact duplicates. Well, you're smarter than I am. But thank you for that. I always do things the hard way. Why do it the easy way? Okay, I believe that's in the center. You get in trouble when you try to make it too perfect sometimes. It's like you should have left well enough alone. All right, so I'm going to heat this up. I'm going to try that after the show's done, Monica, and or the demo's over. I mean, it's not a show, really. I guess it could be. But anyway, I'm going to try that and see how I do with that. Because that would save a lot of futzing. Okay. That appears to be on. All right. But see, so far, this is really not difficult. Like I said before, it's a matter of having all the stuff. Anna Marie, you get the hummingbirds from a man called Eli Ghanimi, or Ghanimi, I think. It's in the handout. But he's on Facebook. He's a very nice man. He makes a lot of different styles. I've got a couple different ones, but my favorite is this single one and this double. But there's a lot more different kinds. But I think if I were to do it again, I'd probably just get a couple of the singles. For what I'm working with, these seem to be just fine. But I guess you can take off the idea for this. Of course, this has to be clean. I've got some flux crusted on here. You could take this off and it's a lighter weight then. So, I mean, that's something that you can decide, what you need it for. But they're wonderful. And he's a very nice man. He'll quote you the prices. He doesn't have, I don't know if he has them listed anywhere. I don't think he has them anywhere listed on Facebook. I'm not sure if he has an Etsy shop or not. But if he does, you might find him on there. But I think the easiest way is to just contact him, send him a message on Facebook. All right, so I took this one out of the pickle. And at this stage, I would clean this up. I would do any refining. Like I had said, there's a little bit of a rough spot up here. I'm going to grind that off gently with my micromotor here. Let me get my face shield on because this stuff just, it sprays all over you, and I don't like that getting on my face and my neck, so a face shield is kind of a neat thing to have. So I'm just going to knock off a little bit of this extra solder on here. Because you don't want anything to be scratchy by your earlobe. But this really didn't need much of anything on here. So clean up would be, I would take this to the sink normally and use a brass brush on it. Just clean it up a little bit. Be careful around the bezel cup. And then I would throw it in the tumbler for a little while to harden up the wire and also shine it up. And then I would set the cabochon. Now the ear wire, to me, that's too long. Or at least for myself, I would think that that's too long. So I would cut off whatever excess I don't want on here. So I would say almost even with the spiral is probably where I would cut it. But that's really up to you what you want to do with that. But I'm gonna just chop it off right level with the spiral. And I would take a cup burr. It's just a small little burr that I set off to the side. It's got a little, if you're not familiar with it, there's different sizes for different size wires. And I'm going to put this in my micromotor and round out the end of this little sharp piece of wire. I just kind of rotate it a little bit. And that just rounds that little end, that little cut end. Just enough so it's not sharp going through your earlobe. All right. And then this would go for a nice tumble for, I don't know, as long as you wanted to tumble it. At least an hour or so is what I would do. So then when you go to set the cab, this is how I've got this set up. Let me move my vise over here. Got one of these little table vices, and it swivels and pivots, and it's pretty cool, like that. And this has nylon jaws in here so it doesn't mar your metal, but it does have some texture in there. If you didn't like that, you could put a little piece of leather inside here to just grab it a little bit without denting it. Okay. So then what I would do is put my ear wire in the jaws. This is just to set the cab. Okay. So that way it's stable. I'm not crushing the wire or anything right here. All right. So I've got some little Amazonite cabs. Now I know I didn't polish this, or I didn't tumble it. This can take the tumbler, I believe. I don't think, I think I've done these Amazonite before in the tumbler. And if it doesn't, well, I'll have learned something new. Now, a lot of times when you get these bezel cups and you get your little 4mm cabochons, a lot of times they don't fit real well. They should, but they don't. It's like the stones aren't really calibrated absolutely correctly. And believe it or not, I've had some bezel cups that said they were a certain size, and maybe they were, instead of 4mm, they were 4 1/4 or 4 1/2, but marked as 4. So that's kind of a, I don't know, I wouldn't say, I mean, I got them from reputable sources, so I can't say that I got it from some unknown place, you know, and I took my chances, but sometimes mistakes happen, you know, and I don't know, that just has been my experience. So anyway, what I do is I've got the back end of a round file, just the flat end, and I kind of push open the bezel cup just a little bit on the walls, just so that cabochon will fit in the cup. Sometimes you have to do that, sometimes you don't. And then, where's my little wax picker upper? Here it is. I've got this little wax thingy that I'm going to pick up my cabochon with and try to place that in the I don't know if I'm straight on or not. I can't tell. Should be. Let's push that down a little bit. All right, so then that's in. And I'm going to take my bezel pusher and do the 12 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 3 o'clock business to close up the bezel. After I do the first one or two, then I kind of like am all over the place. So, because I just can't be consistent. So I just push that in. And then I'll use my smooth set burnisher to burnish this up. And keep the stone in place. I'm not convinced that I have that seated all the way down. It seemed like it was still a tight fit. All right, let's see. Okay, it's in. I like this Amazonite a lot. Turquoise is usually my first go-to, but Amazonite is like the next thing. I really like its color. So then that gets polished up, and that's it. Any questions? And then I would do this, of course, for the other one, but I'm going to tumble the other one and make sure. I guess I'll find out. If I don't have any problem with it, I'm going to post these later when they're all polished. I'll post them later to just show you the finished product. But like I said, I think they should be okay. Oh, the other thing is I'll use the baling plier to just make a more prominent. I should have done that before I cut off this end, just to make it a better curve here, more uniform curve. And then with my fingers, I just kind of flare this out just a little bit, gently, give it a gentle curve. They'll harden up quite a bit more when they're in the tumbler. But that's the whole shebang right there. So, like I said, it's actually quite simple. I mean, sometimes things look much more difficult than they really are until you kind of play around with it. This is kind of a spin-off of something I had seen in a magazine some years ago that had some wire wrapped crystals around it, which was kind of neat, but it didn't have it didn't solder the different wire. It was all the same size wire, so it had to be fairly thin wire so you could stick it through your ears. I think anything thicker than 20 gauge is just too thick, at least for my ears. I don't like it like that. But I'm going to go ahead and finish this one up, or finish the other one up, and then tumble them, and then I will put them on the group page just so you can see what we did. If they came out really nice, I might offer them for sale if anybody wants to buy them. I don't know. I mean, I get all these, I have all these samples, excuse me. And I know there's people here watching that don't have all the stuff to make them. They just like to see how it's done. But if you ever wanted any of the samples that I do, just feel free to ask. Because I've got piles of stuff. Okay, so the other thing I wanted to talk about was the earring kits that I just recently mentioned in the group. And no pressure, believe me, no pressure. This is just something, if you want to do it, fine. I'm going to order the supplies, but I wanted to make sure that I get enough pieces, because I'm not going to buy extra pieces. So I just don't need to have all that in my inventory. But if you like the project and want to do it, I would ask you to decide right away, because I'd like to get the order in. They are for these earrings that I have on right now. I know I posted a picture of them earlier. This is the sterling silver concho, and this has a 4mm cabochon in here in turquoise. Depending on how many people want kits, I don't know how many turquoise cabs I have, but I have Amazonite, I have chrysocolla, and something else. I don't know. I think I have like 3 different stones. And if that didn't make any difference, I would ask you first. But that's an option, that we might change the stone out a little bit. I have these on one of these safety ear wires, but my intention with the kit is that we are going to make our own ear wire with 20 gauge fine silver. So in the kit, you will get 2 conchos, 2 4mm bezel cups, 2 stones, the wire for making the ear wires, and the jump rings to make a bail and also to connect all the pieces together. That with shipping in the US will be $40 for a kit. And I think that's a real deal, because this is not a real lightweight piece. I mean, it's not too heavy for your ear, but it's not a real flimsy concho either. So that's something to consider if you are interested in that. So it doesn't make any difference to me whether you get one or not. I just thought that this would be another demo that we could make the kits, make the earrings together. And if you have all the stuff, then you can make them exactly this way. So please let me know if you want them. And if you do, make sure that you message me your PayPal address, and then I can get on that right away. So we are sticking to Tuesdays, with the exception of today. Tuesdays at 2:30 every other Tuesday. So I won't be here next Tuesday for a demo, but the following Tuesday I will be. And excuse me, I think, just a second. I think I will have enough projects to do if we skip that, alternate the Tuesdays. So I know in a few weeks, my friend Rhonda's going to come here and we're going to do some raku enameling. She's been playing with that a lot. I have to admit, I have not been, but we're going to take the phone and the laptop and all the supplies outside, and we're going to do that raku enamels. We did that, or she did that, when we were in Tucson in February, and some of the pieces just came out really great. So I think you might enjoy that. So, but she's not available for a couple of Tuesdays, so I'm not sure. Excuse me. I'm not sure what I'll do next time, but I'll find something. So I always do. All right. So thanks for joining me. I always appreciate and enjoy when you're with me on the lives. If you have any other questions, just put them in the group page. I will have the handout available for you very shortly. It's got pictures and all the stuff in there, some resources. I'm also going to put some of the resources on the post with the handout. Some of the things you can buy on Amazon if you don't have them. Of course, you can buy them from other companies, but if you buy those products that you need on Amazon, then I get a little bit of a kickback. So I'd appreciate it if you do that. Also, if you enter one of those links and that I post, and you buy something else, I still get credit for it. So that's kind of a cool thing. It's not a lot of money, though. It's only a few cents on the dollar. I mean, a few cents. You have to buy a lot of stuff for somebody to really make money doing that. It's the truth, but hey, every little bit helps. So thanks for watching with me, guys. I'll see you in the group, and have a great day. Try to stay cool. I know I'm going to. Bye-bye.